Welcome into another NFL divisional preview, and we are now done with the NFC, which means we're on to the AFC, and today we're going to start all the way up north with the fiercest division in the NFL, the AFC North. But before we get into the video, I want to take a second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, really helps out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel, as we release multiple NFL-related videos every Tuesday and Friday during the offseason, and Thursday and Saturday during the NFL season, all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. So we're going to start out the AFC North with the first of our AFC teams, the Cincinnati Bengals, who finished 9-8 last year, which was good enough for last in the AFC North. Yes, this is the first time in NFL history that all four teams within the division had a winning record. Now, it was assisted by that 17th game. While I don't know this, I'm sure there probably was at some point in time in the NFL a division of four teams where one team finished 8-8 and finished last in the division. But this is the first time that we did have all four teams with winning records, and the Bengals did it without Joe Burrow for a lot of the season. Well, yes, Joe Burrow did start about half the games in the season. We have to remember that Joe Burrow was playing quite hurt during the first part of that season when the Bengals were losing a lot of games. Then they looked good for a short period of time prior to him injuring himself for the rest of the year. But Jake Browning stepped in and was actually a very effective quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, which I think just shows how good this team was in terms of its play calling, its skill positions, as well as its defense, which I think is often an underrated asset of this team. Now, while the Bengals team is quite good, I think this is one of the last years they'll be able to keep much of this core together. They did have to franchise tag T. Higgins in the offseason, and it very much so does not seem like they are going to be able to re-sign him. They already traded away Joe Mixon this offseason to the Texans, and they also lost offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. So this team is going to start to break up and be centered probably around Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase moving forward. But those two are so good and have such a high-end connection with each other. I have no doubt the Bengals will continue to be able to succeed into the future, even as they lose a lot of their top-end guys that have helped them over the last couple of years and were big pieces to how they made the Super Bowl back in 2022 when they lost to the Rams. And so what does the season outlook look like for the Bengals? Well, I think the Bengals are going to be much better than last in the AFC North. As tough as this division is, we all know the Cincinnati Bengals, when everybody is healthy, is one of the most elite teams in the NFL. There is a reason that the Bengals made it to the NFC Championship game in the 2022-23 season and made it to the Super Bowl in the 2021-22 season. It's because of how good this team is when they're firing on all cylinders. Yes, as we said, they lost Callahan, they lost Mixon, but I don't think that's going to be enough to drop them off from one of the best teams in the AFC and in the NFL in general. And so where do I think the Bengals will end up in 2024? Well, I think they're going to end at 12-5, a 3-game increase over their 2023 record, which might not seem like a lot for a lot of teams, especially with how Joe Burrow played when he was in the lineup for a lot of the year and missing him for a portion of the year. But 12-5 would still have been tied for the second best record in the NFL in 2023. So I think 12-5 is a very solid record, especially seeing as the Bengals play in far and away the toughest division in football. Well, yes, they have a fairly easy schedule thanks to finishing fourth in their division last year. They still have 2 games against the Browns, the Ravens, and the Steelers. Any team that has 2 games against 3 teams of those caliber, yeah, 12-5 shows how good you are, and it's going to be tough to do significantly better than that. Our second team in the AFC North is the Cleveland Browns, our second Ohio-based orange team in the AFC North. And last year, they finished 11-6 in spite having just an absolute cascading number of quarterbacks going through their starting lineup. They had Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, PJ Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It was just a constant revolving door of quarterbacks, and even with that going on, the Browns were still able to finish 11-6, in spite the fact that probably the best quarterback of that bunch was Joe Flacco, which is just shocking given how old he is and how long it's been since he's been an effective starter in the NFL. I mean, it's been a while since he was on the Ravens leading them to a Super Bowl, literally over a decade. But the reason the Browns were able to have such a good record in 2023 was because of how good the rest of their team is, especially their defense. I mean, their defense alone is one of the most elite units in the NFL, able to stifle other teams. Myles Garrett was Defensive Player of the Year for a reason. They got other really solid guys like Tremaine Edmonds, Denzel Ward, etc. on the back end. So they have a really solid defense, and that is not changing in 2024. So I expect this team to still ride or die based on their defense, especially because even if Deshaun Watson is the starter for the Browns, Let's be real. It's been 2 partial seasons with the Browns that we've seen Watson in, and he hasn't been very effective when he started in either of those seasons. And the year prior to that, he was gone for the entirety of the season thanks to his extracurricular activities. However, outside of Watson, the offense is still quite effective. Obviously, Nick Chubb was injured for the vast majority of last season, but their offense was still able to be quite effective running the ball in spite losing him thanks to a fairly solid offensive line that whoever's running the ball is running behind. Beyond that, they have guys like Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and now the addition of Jerry Jeudy catching passes from whoever the heck's throwing the ball for them at any given point in time in the season. And take all that together and you have a very solid football team in spite the significant question marks at the quarterback position. And so I think the Browns are definitely a team that could have a wide level of variance. Obviously, they are an extremely talented team, especially if Deshaun Watson shows that he can be anything like what he was with the Houston Texans. Let me be clear, I hope he's not, but maybe. And so when you're in a division that's incredibly tough like the AFC North is, and you have quarterback play that's incredibly shaky at best and uncertain, there is a lot of variance that this team can have. But I think the fact of how talented this roster is and the fact that I think they have quite good coaching and their defense can keep them in pretty much any game to allow them to establish the run and not need to focus too much attention on their quarterback. I think this team can repeat and go 11-6 in 2024. Yes, a lot of these teams are going to have winning records in the AFC North. Spoiler alert, potentially all of them. But the Cleveland Browns, while they're going to have trouble in the division, I think they are still one of the best teams in the NFL outside of the quarterback position. And if they just get serviceable level of quarterback play, they can absolutely continue to being a top team in the NFL and have an identical 11-6 record in 2024. Our third AFC North team is the Baltimore Ravens, who finished with an NFL best 13-4 regular season record in 2023. And it's absolutely insane to say that a team in a division where every team had a winning record managed to go 13-4 and have the best record in the NFL. You would think if every team had a winning record, they probably beat each other up enough that most teams finished between like 9-8 and 10-7 or 11-6, not 13-4 like what the Baltimore Ravens did. It just shows you how good this division was in 2023. And spoiler alert again, they're just as good this year, this division. The Baltimore Ravens are returning pretty much every significant piece from their 2023 breakout campaign. Lamar Jackson is still the quarterback. They added Derrick Henry in the backfield. And yes, he is an older running back, but he's not really as much of a speed guy as he is a power guy. And so if he's able to seamlessly fit into this Ravens offense, which I'll acknowledge I'm a little hot and cold about, but if he is, he could be absolutely deadly. And this would be the first time that Lamar Jackson's had a true running back with him since he won his first MVP. And let's be clear, his first MVP was significantly better than last season's MVP, where it was mostly just nobody really totally ran away with it. So we gave it to Lamar, who had a pretty good season on the team with the best record in the NFL. Beyond that, the defense should still be really good. Yes, they lost a couple of pass rushers from last year, but this team had one of the highest sack totals in the NFL, with mostly guys that were kind of replaceable. It was more scheme sacks than it was anything else. And yes, they have lost their defensive coordinator to a head coaching job elsewhere, but I totally expect this team will be able to continue their defensive dominance in 2024, given they still have a lot of the main players from that defense, such as Justin Madubuike, who they were able to sign during the offseason, which was a massive part of that defensive line, helping them be so dominant in 2023. And so with how this team is basically just keeping everyone in-house outside of a defensive coordinator and a couple of replaceable edge rushers, I really do think that the Baltimore Ravens can be an absolutely dominant force in 2024 like they were in 2023. And so my prediction for them is 12-5. And you might ask, oh, you're talking about how good they are and how they've added some pieces. Why are you saying they're going to finish one game behind what they did in 2023? And the main reason is in 2022, they didn't win the division, which means they had a slightly easier strength of schedule in 2023. They don't have that luxury in 2024. They have to go against all the division winners. That means the Chiefs. That means the Bills. That means the Texans. Those are tough matchups that the Ravens are going to have to deal with in 2024. And even if you just lose one of those games, that's how you drop to 12-5. And as well, the division isn't getting any easier, so I expect the Ravens to take some L's to some divisional opponents as well, because guess what? This division just beats each other up. That's what they do. And so I think the Ravens at 12-5 is still a very competent record and going to be one of the best records in the AFC. Only one game behind the 49ers, who I've already talked about in a previous video. I had at 13 wins, but still 12-5, absolutely good enough to compete for the number 1 seed in the AFC, and the Ravens absolutely deserve to be there. And our final AFC North team is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are far and away the toughest team to talk about. They finished 10-7 last year and made the playoffs, and I really don't know how they pulled that off. I mean, they had Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and Kenny Pickett at quarterback. Their receivers were Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, who were hot and cold and injured and in trouble for most of the season. They couldn't decide who their running back was between Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. The defense was hit or miss on a week-to-week basis, yet somehow they finished 10-7 because the witch doctor, Mike Tomlin, refuses to let this team ever not have a winning record. I don't know how he does it. One of my adages in the NFL is that the Steelers, you cannot pick Steelers games. You literally have to flip a coin and just trust that they will finish 9-8 or better because it's Mike Tomlin and they're the Steelers. Now, in fairness to the Steelers, I do think they made some nice moves this offseason. I think their QB room is significantly improved based on the fact that they added both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. I think Wilson will probably start. That's what they announced prior to the season. But everything we've seen in training camp is that Justin Fields has been quite good under center and might actually fit into this offense more than we initially expected. And that's a positive for the Steelers. Let's be clear. Both of those guys are upgrades over anybody they had in-house in 2023 at the quarterback position. Beyond that, they got rid of Matt Canada midway through last season, and they finally put up their first 400-yard game in who knows how long immediately after getting rid of Matt Canada. So this offense should be significantly improved. I'll always trust Tomlin and this defense to be a solid unit no matter who they are playing against. And so I do expect the Steelers to still have a winning record in 2024. I already told you it's going to happen, and I expect it to happen again. And so what do I have their record at? I have it at 9-8. I don't think they're going to repeat at 10-7. That shocked me that they managed to pull that off last year. That really seemed like an outlier of expected wins for this team, especially with how they played in many of those games and what we saw in the playoffs. I mean, ugh. They played against the Buffalo Bills, a team that only had one more win than them, and they got absolutely annihilated. So I think the Steelers will pull off some pretty significant upsets. They can very well beat some top teams in this league. In fact, I actually have them beating the Kansas City Chiefs in this season because that's just something the Steelers tend to do somehow. I don't know how they do it. They just do it. But 9-8's the record the Steelers end at, and they're going to have some really good wins and some really bad losses to get there. And so here's what the final standings look like in the AFC North. Yes, for the second straight year and the second time in NFL history, a division and the AFC North is going to have every team with a winning record. I think we can all agree that the Ravens, Bengals, and Browns are all teams that are good enough to have a winning record in 2024. And while I acknowledge the Steelers might be a little bit of a stretch to have a 9-8 record, the fact that Mike Tomlin has never not had a 9-8 or better record is enough evidence for me to basically say, yeah, he's not going to have a losing season. He's never had one before. I think he'll manage to pull off a winning season with 9-8, and that's all she wrote for them. As for the Ravens and Bengals, I do have the Ravens ahead of the Bengals primarily just because the Ravens have a better winning percentage against common opponents. I had them going 1-1 against each other. I had them with identical records within the division. And so it came down to the common opponents where the Ravens just had a better winning percentage. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals walk away with this division, but for now, I have the Ravens winning it for the second straight year. Either way, that's it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Remember to leave a like and comment down below if you enjoyed it. Help us out, help us grow. Again, another reminder, after we are done these divisional previews, we'll be moving to a Thursday and Saturday release schedule. Just make sure you note that. So if you see a video not coming out on a Tuesday or a Friday, that is why. Either way, I'll see you all next time. Peace!